Welcome to another edition of Conversations Different, the podcast from the Santa Fe, New Mexican, focusing on interesting people and issues of northern New Mexico. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and we are talking to Eli Fresquez, Kathlyne Gish, and Angelique Montoya-Chavez about Disability Pride Month, which takes place every July. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Before we get started, let's have everyone introduce themselves and let our listeners know what your interest and what connection you have to Disability Pride Month. And we can start. Angelique, why don't you go first?
I'm Angelique. I'm the proud mama of 2 children with disabilities. They're my pride and joy. And so I serve on different levels throughout the state, but my heart is events like this. I love this kind of stuff.
Good. And Kathlyne?
My name is Kathlyne Gish, and I am a person with disabilities. And I have been really involved in disability advocacy since about 2008 out of personal need to self-advocate for my needs and accommodations. Predominantly, it started in school and in college. And I am now the chair of the Mayor's Committee on Disability and now a governing board member of the New Mexico 501c3 nonprofit Disability Pride New Mexico.
Nice. Okay, and Eli?
Yeah, and we're actually, all 3 of us are board members of the new non-for-profit we set up. My name is Eli Fresquez, and I've been working in the field of disability rights and civil rights really since I entered government many years ago out of law school. And I just love the Americans with Disabilities Act. I find it a fascinating law. It impacts all features of life, of society, whether it's employment or public government, private places of public accommodation like movie theaters and malls. It's just a fascinating law. And I love civil rights, but I find disability rights and advocacy to be just really fulfilling and amazing work.
All right. So Disability Pride Month is connected to the ADA. Is that right, Eli?
That's right. So the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed 34 years ago in July of 1990. It was a bipartisan legislation, and it's a civil rights law. And it's changed the world. Many different countries have followed along the advocacy and the supports that created the ADA, but also the legal compliance that the ADA provides as far as obligations that state and local governments have to do in the private sector as well, and employers. So it's a fascinating law. And so every year in July, there is this Pride Month, and it's somewhat similar to LGBTQ+ in that it is set upon how do we make sure that we're representing our whole community and also that the individualism that we all have. So we really see the LGBTQ+ community and Pride Month as our partners in solidarity of human rights. But for July is designed to really commemorate the passage of the ADA and to celebrate, advocate, and share the awareness.
All right. Kathlyne, you mentioned you started advocating for yourself in college.
Yeah.
What did you need that you weren't getting or that you needed to tell people you need to do this?
Yeah, so in college, it was my disability accommodations for classes. And my experience with my disabilities needing to self-advocate, like most disabled people, you don't have experience, you don't get training, you don't get even support necessarily. You're basically thrown in and have to figure out everything yourself. And that was my experience. And so for me, I really was alone in that and needed to reach out for support this was at SFCC. And through that, interestingly enough, I did get involved in student leadership. And through that student leadership, I did get the support that I needed to really start advocating with other disabled students, including my deaf friends. I learned ASL to be able to communicate with them. And being partially blind, that was not an easy thing for me to learn.
No, I can imagine because it's such a visual.
Yes. But it ultimately was in a positive direction, even though it was a very stressful experience to have to learn being thrown in to that.
And in some ways, you don't necessarily know what you need until you realize you don't have it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was, my list. It took me 15 years to go from my GED to my Master of Social Work. And even into master's level, I was still learning new things that I needed because there was new situations that I had never experienced and discovering that I was not functioning and needing things that were new that I had never needed before. And so I think that, with people with disabilities, a lot of the misconceptions are that we have the diagnosis that we are just diagnosed and we just come with this list of needs. But in reality, my diagnoses happened along the way. My needs happened along the way. Discoveries of things that I needed happened along the way. So it's not just like you go in knowing what you need.
Right, that makes sense. And as a mom, Angelique, you're having to advocate for your kids. So talk about what they need and what you have to ensure they get out in the world.
So at the time that I had my son, I was just a teenager. So I had to learn how to advocate at a very young age. I first started advocating on the Richardson administration for behavioral health. And so I sat on the Behavioral Health Planning Council under Richardson, and I learned how to navigate the system that way. And so I started learning, meeting people, and started getting services for my kids that they needed. Being that they're both medically fragile, we were learning together, right. But a lot of incredible people came alongside me, and I met some really great friends along the way, and they taught me.
So the breakdown of the behavioral health system must have affected you a lot.
It really didn't, because my kids don't have behavioral health.
Oh, okay,
needs.
okay.
It's all medical issues and cognitive delays and stuff like that. So, but it was a neat way for me to learn how to advocate. And I took those skills with me into the school setting, where I had to learn how to write an IEP and advocate for other parents and teach them how to write IEPs. And
that's the individual education program.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you're identified as having special needs, whether you're gifted or have a disability or something, then you get a plan that helps meet you where you are.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a tool for the kids to be able to be successful at their level, at their comprehension level, whatever they can do. And from there, I just started advocating in the actual classroom.
Okay.
I started volunteering in the classroom. For sports, I became a coach, just all of that stuff. So I was able to get the kids into sports with their peers. At Capitol High School, my daughter was able to cheer under Coach Laura and Amy. So they broke the rules.
Nice.
They became a different face amongst their peers. All the popular kids loved them. And as we started to host events like awareness walks and dances and things like that the kids needed in the city, their typical peers would come alongside them. Mm-hmm. And talk about inclusion. My kids have been blessed as far as that goes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's due to probably a tough mama. So on that note, we'll take a quick break and be back with another segment of Conversations Different.
Thanks, Inez. This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez. Great local content is only possible with a talented staff dedicated to bringing you the best local content possible. For that staff to do its work, we need your support by subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. If you're already a subscriber, thank you. And if not, there's never been a better time to subscribe. In addition to our home-delivered newspaper that comes with full digital access, we also provide digital-only subscriptions for SantaFeNewMexican.com. We'll also be releasing more online-only audio and video programming moving forward. The Santa Fe New Mexican has been here for nearly 175 years, and we want to continue being your source for local news and information. Visit us at SantaFeNewMexican.com/subscribe or call us at 505-986-3010. Thank you.
It's a new day in New Mexico, and the doors to boundless opportunity are open as tens of thousands of New Mexicans reach higher to pursue a dream, broaden their horizons, and retrain for a better job. With the New Mexico Lottery and Opportunity Scholarships, you could build yourself a better future anywhere in the state. You put in the hard work, we'll help with the costs. For eligibility details, visit reachhighernm.com.
We are back with Conversations Different, discussing Disability Pride Month. Eli, talk about some of the events that are going on right now to raise awareness about the need for inclusion and to help people navigate the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll defer to Angelique for the parade as well, because she has been really instrumental in coordinating a lot of the work with the community. But we have two events. The first one's on July 13th.
And we'll air after that. So if you missed it, you're going to have to get ready for next year.
Yeah, that's right. And we're going to be meeting at 9 a.m. at the St. Francis Cathedral. And from there, we're going to be coming together and marching to the plaza. We're going to loop around the plaza once and then head to City Hall. And then at City Hall, we're going to have the mayor give a proclamation, talk about disability and access, and then raise the disability pride flag. And the disability pride flag is similar to the LGBTQ pride flag, but has some nuances to it. And it's really cool because it has stripes that represent different kinds of disabilities. So this parade is meant to be intersectional, but also to include all disabilities in that march.
And that's important because, I mean, if you see somebody in a wheelchair, it's like, duh, I get it. But there are so many ways that people are different in their abilities that we can't see with our eyes. And, you know, if you have a student in class that maybe has no attention span because of ADHD or one of those conditions, you know, you just think they're poorly behaved. And how do we educate ourselves?
Yeah, hidden disabilities is a huge deal, right? And I think many people don't quite make the connection between disability and behavior and mental health issues, depression, things like neurodiversity. So we really want to highlight that many disabilities are hidden disabilities. I think often we think of disabilities as people in wheelchairs, walkers, canes, and sensory disabilities, but it's beyond that. Just to go back real quick to the City Hall, once we do the ceremony at City Hall, and we appreciate the city for all their support in that, we are then going to be having a tabling and resource fair at the plaza. We have roughly 25, close to 30 different resource tables on the plaza, along with entertainment. And I'm going to actually defer to Angelique.
So Angelique, tell us more.
Okay, this is where I get excited. So we actually have invited a lot of guests. Hopefully they're all going to come alongside us and march with us. But on the actual plaza, we have performances, music, live entertainment. One that I'm really excited about is the Powaka Hoop Dancers.
Oh, they're wonderful.
Powaka was a winner of our Accessibility Awards last year. So for them to come and donate their time and their resources and actually celebrate with us is pretty exciting. We also have Cristina Perea, who is a local New Mexican artist. She's a huge advocate when it comes to people with disabilities, and so I'm excited to have her on board. I actually call her a friend, and I'm excited for her to come alongside us again. She actually was our MC last year at our event and did fantastic. She had her sister-in-law, who was the first princess in the royal court, the Fiesta Court, to have Down syndrome. So she broke all the rules. So this is really exciting for us. And
this year, one of the princesses is in a wheelchair.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's really exciting, you know. So things are changing. Yeah. And this is part of it. We are allowed to have 38 tables. I'm hoping all 38 tables are filled. So that's going to be exciting. And we have businesses, organizations, and individuals that either cater to, service, you know, they provide things for people with disabilities. So yes, we have state and city resources, but we also have local businesses. And they're the ones that either hire people with disabilities or provide one-to-one services. You know, when you walk into their business, you're just accepted and you don't feel different. That kind of.
Now, since this is a one-time event, if you miss it, where can you go to find out about these services? Is there a website? Is there a place where, you know, I need to help my kid get extra help for school because he's not reading correctly or whatever?
Yeah, there's three places. We have an Eventbrite page that we'll leave up where folks can go and get some of the details about the parade. We also have a Facebook page that we just set up. We're a brand new 501c3,
okay.
So our Facebook page is where I would direct people. We also
tell me the name of it so we
Disability
know.
Pride New Mexico on Facebook.
Okay.
And we also have a website that we're building literally right now building it. We hope to have it possibly finalized as soon as tonight. Kathlyne's been working day and night on that. And then another place, just to give a shout out to Kathlyne and her work and her leadership and the Mayor's Committee on Disability here in Santa Fe, is the MCD. People can also reach out to the MCD for any issues or concerns when it comes to disability access here in the city.
And that's the Mayor's Committee on Disability.
Yes.
Acronyms in my brain do not work all the time. But Kathlyne, talk about why this is still such an issue 34 years after the act passed. Because it seems like we've made a lot of progress, and then it feels like maybe we haven't.
Right. Yeah, and even during the pandemic, you know, I got really hopeful that things that we learned through the pandemic would stay. And a lot of that is now backtracking. no, I think in a lot of ways things are not progressing as much as they need to be. Even if they are moving forward slowly, it's very slow. Yeah. And I think that, even I've been thinking about, because I've lived here for 20 years, and when I first moved to Santa Fe, we had 24/7 paratransit service. We had a 24/7 pharmacy.
Yeah.
We had, better medical care. I got a doctor right away. I could see specialists right away. So just thinking about those kinds of things and real services and real needs of the community, even just on the local level, it's actually gone backwards.
Yeah.
And so, being in this work now, trying to make the changes that we are trying to advocate for, that's really a big part of why Disability Pride New Mexico was established, was to advocate and to bring people together to advocate so that we don't keep going backwards, so that we do move forward, and so that disabled voices and the needs of people with disabilities are heard and are listened to. And, of course, it's a challenge. It will always be a challenge. But I think that's a big part also of Disability Pride Month, is saying we have value, what we are experiencing needs to be heard, and we have a right to be heard.
I think that's really important. I know during the pandemic, when people started getting upset about wearing masks, it was all about, well, it's my right. And there was not nearly enough attention to the idea that fragile people could get sick and die. And now coming out of the pandemic, there's such a resistance to still recognizing that medically fragile people are with us. And if you don't try to mitigate some of the effects, you're saying you have to stay home the rest of your life and never leave your house.
Exactly. And that was a big part of, and I did, we did not go anywhere. I was lucky enough to have someone with a vehicle and do grocery pickups. We still are doing that. We are still limiting contact as much as possible. And I did get COVID in February, and I am still having issues from that with my breathing. So it is still a problem. And I think more the problem that I see is the attitude of, we don't have to care about those people.
Yeah. It's like you're disposable.
Yes.
And I mean, so there were people who said, well, a lot of the people who died, were too fat anyway, or they were sick, so it's okay.
Exactly.
And it was awful. I just I didn't know we were that nasty of a country.
Yeah, it was an attitude that we are disposable, that we don't matter. And I think that is also a large part of why we are organizing now, because we do matter.
Yeah.
We absolutely matter. And we do contribute to society, and we do make a difference, and we need to be heard and included and recognize that we have value.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to risk your life to go to the grocery store,
Exactly.
really. Angelique, were you wanting to say something?
I think I had a different perspective.
Good.
I think that people were really good to us and very kind and very, very gracious.
Good.
I think the fact that my daughter breathed through a trach, and during COVID, my son had to have emergency brain surgery, and we had to rush him to Denver Children's. And it was terrifying, but the kindness that people extended to us was amazing, and even now people are really cautious with them, very supportive of them. Wherever we go, they always recognize them. And so it's important to me. Like, Pride Month is important to me because I have this sense of pride. Even though they have disabilities, I take them everywhere. We are very social. We are very active in the city. And when I march down that street, it's going to be with my head held high and with this sense of value for my kids. And that's the way that they reflect into the world, literally, so bright, because I don't think they know they have disabilities, because it's cognitive disabilities. They don't know the difference. They just know that life is exciting, and this is a parade, and my little girl's so excited.
Oh, I love that. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's how it should be for everybody. And I think that it sounds like the work that you're doing on your committee and with your nonprofit is to make that a reality. Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Good.
Yeah.
And we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
My name is Maria Jose Rodriguez Cadiz, and I am the Executive Director with Solace Sexual Assault Services. Our mission is to prevent sexual violence and empower survivors of sexual violence through restoring dignity, strength, and resiliency. For almost 51 years, Solace has reduced the impact of sexual violence. We do it by focusing on human rights, social justice, hope, and dignity. We believe survivors are experts in their own experiences and acknowledge that empowering them is crucial to their healing. Our advocacy, forensic interviewing, and therapy services are centered to their needs. Our sexual violence prevention programs in schools and community is just as important. Please check our website at findsolace.org. And if in need, you can call our 24/7 hotline, which is 800-721-7273. Your support is crucial to the lives of survivors. Thank you. Gracias.
We are back again with Conversations Different, talking about Disability Pride Month. Eli, you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, no, this is a great conversation. I think one of the things about Disability Pride, too, is to reduce stigma. I think we were talking about that. And how do we, like Angelique said, raise our heads high? I also think that, and Kathlyne was talking about this, is those barriers to access. Many of them are physical barriers, not having access to restaurants or medical facilities because there are steps or there isn't appropriate ramps being provided, or the restrooms are inaccessible. So we have those physical barriers. We also have lots of financial barriers that exist for many people in the disability community. Many people in the disability community are underemployed or unemployed at a higher rate than people without disabilities. But I think the biggest barrier, and Kathlyne was talking about this, was that barriers of attitude. People who don't see the disability community as qualified to talk about the needs that they deserve, and they also legally are required to be provided to. So that's part of the Accessibility Awards, where we want to acknowledge, support, and lift up our community. So members in our community who are doing things to help support people with disability, hiring people with disabilities, providing those accommodations. And that's where I think once we break down a lot of those attitudinal barriers that we have in our mind, I think the physical barriers and those financial barriers will kind of fall into place.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And Kathlyne, talk about the committee work that you're doing, because I know as someone who I'm always having, I'm not disabled, but I have foot problems and I'm always tripping. And I just think the sidewalks here are awful. And I just wonder, what happens if you don't have your eyesight or if you're in a wheelchair? How do you get around downtown Santa Fe?
A lot of times you don't.
Yeah, that was my impression.
Yeah. No, I knew David McQuarrie. He was a disabled advocate and on the Mayor's Committee on Disability for a very long time. I want to say over 15 years. And he was the one who really fought for City Hall to have curb cuts because he needed to access City Hall to be able to advocate for people with disabilities. And, I think about him constantly when I am downtown, and I have the same issue. I have ankle problems, and I can really easily fall on the uneven sidewalks. And, the attitude, it's the same issue of attitude has pretty consistently been, well, we're a historical city. We don't have to comply with ADA. We don't have to upgrade anything or fix anything, which is not true. Yes. Yep. And so a lot of what we are trying to have to fight against is that attitude of, well, we don't have to lift a finger. We don't have to do anything to change because this is just history. And it's absolutely untrue. And so that is a big part of what we're doing, is trying to change cultural awareness to include people with disabilities from the start to
when you're planning something,
yes,
figure out how they can get in and out.
Yeah. And to change the systems so that they do include the awareness of accessibility when they are planning it, rather than as an afterthought, which is the most common way that they say, oh, we forgot to do something.
It's kind of like having a meeting in Santa Fe and not having Spanish translation or not having sign language. It's like you're just writing off a third of the people, basically.
Exactly. And we just, in the Mayor's Committee on Disability, we just held a vote to work towards creating a resolution of Nothing About Us Without Us, which is an intersectional language, cultural, disability access resolution, and we will be working on that in the next few months, and I've gotten positive feedback from that. So
good.
Those are the kinds of things that we're doing with the Mayor's Committee right now, is really trying to change internally within the city the attitudes, the ways that the city functions, the ways that the city organizes to include people with disabilities.
Right. Eli, talk about what you want your nonprofit to do and like kind of what your goals are going to be going forward.
Well, that's a question for all three of us, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really see us as being a place of advocacy, a place of support, education, a place of pride, doing events, but also thinking about how we can make sure that we can reduce barriers to access. And just one point, too, is that I think there's two different models in the disability framework. One is the medical model, the other is the social model. The medical model is more tiered on, like, how do we cure people, which is important. We should be curing people. You know, there's terrible diseases and cancer. But we should also be looking at the social model, and that's how do we reframe and redevelop and reestablish different kinds of social service supports and physical infrastructure. And it's really an investment in our community. It's an investment with return on value. When we make things universally accessible, it helps everyone. So that's kind of the things that we want to talk about, educate, advocate, and celebrate, you know, all folks in New Mexico. The parade is the first in New Mexico's history. Other parades have also been done around disability pride in Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, California. But we're bringing this to New Mexico to have that conversation, to celebrate, and to bring in other partners on this journey.
Okay, one thing, since you are a lawyer, is there a legal definition of what disability means?
Yeah, so there are many different definitions depending on the type of law. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, it does have an actual definition of substantial impairment to physical or mental abilities. And that's not an exact definition,
right,
but that's basically it. But disability law is complex, so you're going to have different definitions based on Social Security requirements. But under the American Disabilities Act in 504, those are the definitions. And I would also just to point out that there has been new rules that have been passed by the Department of Justice, who enforces the Americans with Disabilities Act. And these new rules also provide guidance and technical requirements for state and local governments. For example, they now have to have accessible websites. And they have a 2-year basic time frame to develop their websites and make those accessible. I think digital accessibility is kind of the future and one of those places where we really need to strive to make improvements, since so many services are now online.
Yeah, exactly. And I experience that a lot. You know, I'm actually going through it right now with the transition to turquoise care on Medicaid, and navigating literally not being able to sign in because it's not functioning properly. And so that's what I was doing all this morning.
Oh, that's so wrong.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's, you know, yeah, I have people to reach out to and they have people to reach out to, but it's not something that's solved right away. And it's something that absolutely impedes our lives and our ability to function and access the resources that we need.
Angelique, what would you like to see changing in the landscape to improve access for disabled people, for their families, support for caregivers? What do you need?
So my focus is primarily on the family, right? To be able to have resources at the library, in the schools, when they have camps or services like their peers, that they're able to go in there and have the supports that they need. Also pediatric therapies and resources, and help the parents navigate the system, because things like the DD waiver or MIVIA waiver, things like that are extremely difficult to navigate. And when you're going into it for the first time, these are things that families need. They need assistance. So I want to, continue that work.
So it sounds like we need people trained to be helpers.
I think so, just to come alongside the advocates. And we need a lot more resources for people with disabilities, children with disabilities. We focus on their healthy peers, and that's not always the case. We need to accommodate for the kids with disabilities, whether they're physical, whether they're cognitive, whatever it is. But I want to see the kids included.
And we still have an inclusion model in our schools. At least that's what I remember in the years when my son was in school and going back. So you don't have like a little room where you put all the kids with disabilities together necessarily, unless it's really, really severe, is what they used to do in Santa Fe.
We still have self-contained classes, and sometimes that's the best option. That was always the best option for my kids. They always had a nurse, and they were one-on-one with the nurse and the teachers, and that was the best model for our family. But that's not the best model for everybody. That's not the least restrictive environment when it comes to a child. So whatever that IEP says, I want to see that implemented. I want to make sure that it's family-centered, that it's child-centered, and that it's followed through with. I that's what I want to see.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you're adamant they're going to get the services they need.
I believe they are. I think together, if we work together and we're positive, I think it's going to happen.
Okay.
I think you win more people over by having a model, by coming alongside them, than demanding it. I think that's the way it works.
Well, and this is kind of my last question, and each of you can take a turn. Does it change how things work if people realize this is an opportunity and not a burden? That inclusivity is, like you said, lifts the community.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. There's a little bit of a push-pull. The way I sort of frame it is, I think about exercise. Like, if you exercise once or twice, you're going to get some benefits to it. But civil rights and disability rights is something you needed to do 2 or 3 times a week, right? It's something that you need to continue to work out because you will atrophy. So there was lots of fantastic work that's been done, and things are moving in a very positive direction. But there is always that possibility of taking a step back. So that's why I think we're here to advocate and continue to push things forward and to do that daily workout that we need to do.
Right. Angelique, what do you think? Is it an opportunity that people need to seize?
I think it's an opportunity, and I think that the kids having a disability, it's taught me different things, and it's given me a different perspective. I find a lot of joy in them waking up every morning and taking care of them and changing their diapers and doing the things that people take. I don't know. My life is different, but I think that their cousins, their friends, the city, everybody comes alongside of them. And so I don't experience that. So I think they're very inclusive, and I think this is a great opportunity to teach the community, like, what they have to offer, what other people have to offer. And when you learn from people, I don't know, I think it changes your perspective.
I think that's a great point. And Kathlyne, we'll end with you.
I think that, the opportunity comes especially with including people with disabilities. And I think, if we can lift up disabled voices to be heard, and recognizing the sincere value. We my deaf friends were amazing, at SFCC. They were absolutely advocating for themselves and their needs, and then including other people with disabilities as well. And, when we take these opportunities to lift disabled voices, to do what we're doing with this nonprofit, Disability Pride New Mexico, I think that they will start to see it as an opportunity to progress inclusion. And, the reality is that most people will become disabled in their lifetime if they live long enough. And,
especially if they trip as much as I do.
And me. And so, it's, to me, the way that I view it is that we are really working towards making society be so that as people age, or as people become injured, or as people develop whatever disorder they're going to develop, that they don't have to stay home, so that they don't have to be excluded from participating in our amazing events in Santa Fe. All of the wonderful cultural events and all of the things on the plaza. Right now, and a lot of people are excluded from those.
Yeah.
And it's entirely because of access and attitude. And so, for me, it's always an opportunity. Like, that's how I view this. And I think that that's why I'm even here doing this work, is I see it as an opportunity, and I know what society can look like. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a great ending. And on that note, we'll be back again next week with another Conversations Different.